Managing Director for Step Up Silicon Valley of Catholic Charities. I am so delighted to see many of you, especially many new faces from the city, the county, and the local community as a whole, because the whole idea of these sessions that we've started this year, it's called Preventing Generational Poverty, is to engage those who have the ability and the capacity to learn and make a difference in the community, because we do believe that if poverty has to be reduced or prevented, we have to invest in children, and I think this session is going to be critical to that discussion. I'll tell you more about Step Up, but right now let me just introduce you to Professor Bill Sandstrom, and I actually just up here to thank him. This is a partnership between Step Up and the Levy School of Business to bring some thoughts and ideas and maybe hopefully action to what's happening locally. So instead of just having to deal with educational, developed materials, but also we wanted to really bring the community voice into the university and the community as a whole. So I hope you take something today, and looking forward to hearing Conway, and just welcome. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Almaz. So welcome. This is the Levy School of Business, but this is a joint venture, as Almaz mentioned, between us and Step Up and our many, many partners in the community. I'm a professor here in the econ department. I've been partnering with Step Up for a while now. Before I do any introductions, let me just make a couple of thank yous to Almaz, of course, and to Angela Silvera, who's back here, who works with Catholic Charities and Step Up. And the coffee and refreshments are being paid for today by the Ignatian Center for Jesuit Education here on campus. You can Google them and see their many interesting activities, including an ongoing Bannon Institute, as we call it, looking at issues of justice and the common good over this year and next. So a number of interesting programs. So thanks to Teresa Ladrigan-Welpley and Kaylee Erickson over there, and Marianne Farag was here and might have disappeared, who's the administrative assistant in the econ department, who helped us get this all arranged and set up, so thanks to her. For those of you who are new to Step Up, there's a little flyer there at your table, so you can read more and go to the website, and Almaz may have more to say later. It's a social innovation network that's been operating for a number of years here, focused on reducing poverty in the Silicon Valley greater area and move people up out of poverty, so Step Up out of poverty. A number of partner organizations, a very long list from nonprofit service organizations to governmental agencies and organizations, educational and religious organizations, and advocacy groups. And we're really starting to focus more on incubating innovations for poverty reduction, which fits nicely with the theme today. So this, as Almaz mentioned, our Learning and Development Series latest theme has been on preventing generational poverty, by which we mean sort of the persistence across generations of low-income status and poverty. At our last session, I summarized a little bit of some of the recent research on intergenerational income mobility in the United States, and how, as we're all well aware, starting out in poverty in the United States makes it much more likely that a child will grow up and be in poverty. Certainly not a life sentence by any means. There still is a substantial mobility, but very limited compared to what we might hope for in terms of equal opportunity. One of the findings of that research, and then I will just go ahead and introduce Conway, is the essential importance of education and childhood development, and in particular early childhood development. That's something that many, many scholars across the board agree on. And those policies and programs can appear to be expensive, but I think most economists who look at these issues feel that the cost-benefit analysis really pays off in the long run. And so even from a purely self-interested political point of view, society ought to be quite open to spending a lot more money on these issues. Now, we have limited confidence, I think, that we're going to see very much coming out of Washington in the near future, but we are fortunate to live in a state where the politics are hopefully a little bit more conducive. And so that really makes it interesting and timely to introduce today's speaker to talk about some of those issues of policy and policy advocacy that we could all get involved in here in California. So I'll just do a very quick intro of Conway Collis. He's the president and CEO of GRACE, which stands for Gather, Respect, Advocate, Change, Engage, which is a nonprofit organization sponsored by the Daughters of Charity and is dedicated to reducing child poverty in California. GRACE is the sponsor of Assembly Bill 1520, the Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty Act, and I'm sure he'll have something to say about that. Conway's been a public servant and advocate for social change for more than 4 decades. He's a graduate of Occidental College and Stanford Law School. He's most recently initiated and sponsored a state Medi-Cal financing system that's generated over $20 billion for health care for low-income Californians and $2 billion for children's health care at no cost to patients or to state taxpayers. Win-win. And I'm sure he'll tell us a lot more about some of GRACE's important advocacy work, especially in regards to this important legislation. And so I welcome Conway Collis to Santa Clara and to step up, and he'll talk to us about child poverty in California, why we must act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's always heartening to see someone that somehow is in both the worlds of academics and as well as action. So thank you. And before I start, I just want to particularly thank Greg and Almaz as well as Angela for all of the work with Catholic Charities. You're a wonderful partner, and we're grateful for your partnership, your leadership, and your work. And thank you. And to step up Silicon Valley. There's so much that we have to do together, and thank you also for your leadership. I want to particularly recognize, although I know she generally doesn't like me to, but Sister Raquel Silvestri from the Daughters of Charity. You know, the Daughters have been fighting poverty in California for over 165 years, 165 years of service. And I think this is a good time to let them know that, first of all, we appreciate 165 years of service, and we're not going to let them down. We're going to win this fight. So thank you for being here, Sister Raquel. 1,950,000. 1,950,000. That's the U.S. Census says are the number of children in poverty in California. Now that's the largest number of children, the highest percentage of children in poverty of any state in the United States. But I think it's helpful to think about it a little bit differently, because we shouldn't think about it in terms of statistics or numbers. These are almost 2 million individual human beings. Hopes, dreams, pain, successes, almost 2 million children in California. So, you know, here with Catholic Charities, I think it's a good time to maybe think about a quote that's generally attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. And he was supposed to have said, "Preach the gospel, use words if necessary." Well, with 2 million kids in California, pretty good time to listen to St. Francis, because it's just time to stop talking and start doing. And we've got a way to do that. I mean, I think it's safe to ask, is there anybody in the room that thinks it's somehow okay to have 2 million children in poverty in California when we have the clear and absolute ability to change that? Is there anybody? I didn't think so. You know, I used to be chairman of the state tax board, and I think one thing that's important to realize is that this is obviously a human crisis, but it's also a fiscal crisis for the state. Because if you look at the costs that flow from child poverty in the state, incarceration, foster care, social services, and by the way, lost tax revenue. from folks that are tax takers instead of taxpayers. You know, Brad Williams is the former head of the economic analysis section of the state legislative analyst's office. No less an authority than the Wall Street Journal has called Brad the best economic forecaster in California, the best economic forecaster in California. And Brad Williams has estimated that the savings from meaningfully addressing child poverty in California, now there's a range because it depends on other economic factors and all of that, but he says it's safe to estimate that the savings for the state, if we meaningfully address child poverty in the state, would be between $12 and $18 billion a year. Between $12 and $18 billion a year. So this is a human crisis, but it's also a fiscal crisis for the state. But the deal is we got a way to address it. AB 1520, the Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty Act. Really just does three things, very simple. First, it commits the state to a 50% reduction in child poverty over 20 years. 50% reduction over 20 years. And the reason to say 20 years and not more quickly is so that we can do the systemic things. We can invest in prenatal care and child care and early childhood education, and that takes a little while. You have to hit a generation of children before you get all of the benefits of that, as well as obviously doing the kind of income supports and job training that we also need to do. Second, build science into the state budget. It requires each year that there be an analysis done that is presented with the state budget each year of where we are with the child poverty that year, what the impact of the state budget is going to be in terms of meeting the state commitment, and to provide a roadmap of what we need to do in order to meet the commitment beyond what may be in the budget. So it provides kind of a headline with the state budget on child poverty each year. And it does one more thing. It provides a framework for the legislature for the kind of programs and services that need to be included as part of fighting child poverty. And no offense to Santa Clara, but we developed this with the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality. They did an 8-month study, and they looked at what we could prove to people are the programs that are both effective and cost-effective. So, no surprise to anybody in the room, it's the programs that you all know work. So it's prenatal care, home visiting programs, so we provide early health care and social services to people, child care, quality early childhood education, after school, tutoring, job training programs, and then also later income supports, earned income tax credit, and expanded CalWorks. So we're at least getting children and their families to at least subsistence level, which is not the situation now with regard to CalWorks. One other important aspect of 1520, a lot of times, for example, we saw this with the minimum wage fight in California. You get conflicting analysis. One side says, here's going to be the economic impact, and the other side says the economic impact is going to be something else. So 1520 does one other thing that's important, and that is that it puts into the bill itself the kind of criteria that are going to need to be examined to come out with the analysis of the impact of that budget. So it includes things like test scores and graduation rates and juvenile arrest records and incidents of maltreatment and ADHD. So, a whole range of the kind of criteria that the Legislative Analyst's Office and the Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality have focused on as the kind of data that needs to be analyzed so that there's agreement on the criteria that's going to be looked at. So this is really, this isn't a new idea. This is what the state did with global warming, AB 32. The state's also done it with an analysis of the capital needs of the state. That's the reason that very recently the state provided $6 billion to repair highways in the state. So there's lots of precedents for doing these kinds of goal settings and then putting in place a process to be sure that we get to those goals. So AB 1520 is moving through the legislature, got through its first committee, Human Services, 6-0, even picked up a Republican vote. And there are over 40 organizations around the state now supporting it, including Catholic Charities of Santa Clara, Children's Defense Fund, Children Now, First Five California, and even the National Association of Pediatricians. So there are lots of broad-based organizations now supporting it. And something I thought was really interesting, it really is at this point bipartisan. The assembly leader in the state assembly, Chad Mays, recently asked to join the legislation as a co-author, and we've allowed that. He has. So it really is bipartisan. So what we got is we've got a human and a fiscal crisis. We've got a balanced but aggressive and data-driven bill in the state legislature that commits the state to a 50% reduction over 20 years. It uses the best Stanford research to get there. And despite that, what we're going to face in the legislature, and certainly from the governor, all good people. But what's so interesting is that there's so many good people that when you talk about child poverty, they all say, oh yeah, that's terrible. We got to do something about that. But this year, not this year, because this year we got to focus on the state reserves, or we did deal with transportation. So next year, for child poverty, that's always what happens with child poverty. People are concerned about it, but it's never at the top of their list. It's never treated as something that is the systemic answer to all of the later issues, so many of the later issues that people face. Or they'll say, the bill's not perfect. It's not perfect. I wish it did X or Y, or it didn't force the legislature to take action. Or, it might be too expensive, because once we do the study and it shows what else we need to do that isn't in the budget, that's going to create a lot of budget pressure. So those are the kind of things that we're going to hear. And it's really up to us in this room. We're the ones that have to fight that. We're the ones that have to push back. Because we're the ones, all of us together, we're the ones that when they say, we're concerned about child poverty and, maybe next year, we're the ones that have to say to them, there are 2 million reasons in California that AB 1520 just won't wait. We got to say to them, we got to tell them, look, we agree with you. We got to build up the reserves. We think it's great what you did on transportation. We need to do those things. We got to say to them, though, those are the things that address the state's physical infrastructure. This is the state's human infrastructure, and we got to deal with that too. So it's really up to us. There's nobody out there. There are no powerful interest groups that are going to do it. This is us. And so let me ask you to do a couple things. First of all, for each of the organizations represented, go online, endorse Assembly Bill 1520, the Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty Act. Contact your legislative representatives. Contact the governor's office. Sign up for End Child Poverty CA. End Child Poverty CA. Sign up so that we can work together and be coordinated in pushing this legislation through. and use Facebook, use Twitter, use all the social media to tell others about it and get them involved, because that's really, that really is the key. This needs to be a movement in California. So for End Child Poverty CA, we've got thousands that are now signed up, but we need thousands more. So really, this isn't something, please do it today. Don't leave it to somebody else. Do it right away. So that when people say to us, you know, child poverty is important, but maybe next year, so that we've got hundreds of thousands of Californians are saying to them, there are 2 million reasons that 1520 has got to pass this year. And when folks say, well, you know, it's not perfect, we got to say to them, we all have to say to them, you know what? Perfection resides in the Lord, and we're doing the best we can, and this is as close to perfection as we can get a piece of legislation. And when they say, you know, we got to build up the state reserves first, because we don't know what Trump and the Republicans in Washington are going to do, we got to say to them, reserves are important, but these are human lives, and we're here to fight for those human lives. We've got something that works, and now it's up to us to get it done. Questions? Yep, in back.
Can you name some specific groups maybe or places we could target our advocacy, places where people would be more easily convinced to start joining us?
Well, you know, I don't know if you're with a particular organization.
Yeah.
Which one?
So the Jewish Council for Public Affairs.
Once more, I'm sorry?
Sorry, Jewish Public Affairs Committee of California.
Oh, okay.
Have you done it a couple weeks ago?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the groups, thank you for doing so, one of the groups that have formally endorsed AB 1520. Thank you for doing it. By the way, as well as the California Catholic Conference, the state organization of bishops, a whole bunch of churches around the state. So it is, the faith-based community is starting to come together around this. You know, really the best thing is to take the lists of contacts from your organization and reach out to them. And get them writing letters and calling and communicating to their contacts on social media. So it's really best if you could do it, and also to get temples as well as other religious organizations and get them to start emailing and contacting their lists of members and congregants. So that's what I would suggest. Thank you. In back and then up here.
Hi, Matt Finley from Santa Clara County Office of Education.
Great.
How do you intend to deal with resistance from the government?
Yeah, that's the reason why I want everybody involved. I want the question is how do we intend to deal with Jerry? You know, look, I actually think Jerry's a great governor, and I think he's brilliant in so many ways. And I've negotiated with him on one thing or another for, I don't know, 40 years, a long time. This is a blind spot that he's got. He really does. I mean, in terms of the issues, and he shouldn't. I mean, he's Jesuit trained and all the rest, but he just has a blind spot in terms of the issues of poverty. The issues, for example, early childhood education. Look, everybody in the room knows that the extent there's no panacea, but to the extent there is one, that's really crucial. You know, we know what the evidence is. It's so clear. And there's such a shortfall in terms of subsidized early childhood education. Jerry's comment once on early childhood education, I guess about a year and a half ago, was, you know, I didn't go to preschool. It didn't hurt me. Well, yeah, Jerry, your father was governor, you know. I mean, I mean, so it's just, look, I mean, he's a good person, and I do think he's brilliant, but this is just a blind spot. And so I think what we have to show Jerry are, when I said that Brad Williams, a real economic forecasting expert, acknowledged, says that there'll be a savings of $12 to $18 billion each budget year once we've fully implemented this. I think those are the arguments that make a difference, because it really is true that you just can't have 2 million children in poverty in the state without that swallowing the state budget at some point. So it's pay now or pay later. And I think those are the arguments that we need to make. The other one is that this is going to create budget pressures. There's no question. We are short-funded in a whole range of these programs. Everybody in here knows that. But in terms of how we're going to address it, we're first going to do the analysis of what's now being spent, a comprehensive look at what the state, counties, local governments, school districts are spending. We're going to get the overall view of everything that's being done, for example, in early childhood education. We're going to see what the shortfall is in the number of spaces. And then once we really have that data and that information, then we're going to see what needs to be spent. And so at that point, if it creates budget pressures, Jerry, 2 million kids creates budget pressures. That's just reality. So, but I think it takes a whole lot of us telling them that, and there needs to be a groundswell of folks that are doing that. I'm sorry, that's a long answer, but that's really the critical issue is Jerry. Yes?
What is the fiscal impact of 1520?
Well, I think that's, we don't know the answer to that. And we don't know the answer because that's the importance of the comprehensive study that comes first, is we're going to see, it's interesting because, I mean, nobody would run a business like this. But the reality is that we've done, for example, with global warming, there's been an analysis and a study of where we are and what needs to be done in order to meet the state reduction goals. It's really interesting that for child poverty, there has not been that kind of comprehensive analysis that provides the data and analysis that everyone can use to work off of. So the first step is we'll get that study. It's got to look at the data that's been set out in the bill that needs to be looked at. We're going to see what the shortfall is, and then we're going to see what needs to be spent.
Is there a cost estimate for the study?
The Assembly Appropriations Committee has estimated it at around $400,000 to $500,000. It's probably low, by the way. I think it'll probably be, to do the kind of comprehensive work that's necessary, it'll probably be a little bit over $1 million. The bill also, by the way, creates a state task force that will work with the state legislative analyst office in doing the study. And by the way, should, include folks in this room, at least representatives, to be part of it. So I don't mean to avoid the question. It's just we need to see what it is. It'll be substantial. Yes, sir.
So I'm Pete Miller, just a private citizen.
Right.
Interested private citizen.
Good.
So thank you for your work. It's great on this bill. What I'm curious about is to what degree, I haven't read, to what degree does it leverage the private sector, private money? It seems to me you're talking 20 years. The Googles and the Apples and they must be tremendously concerned about the workforce in 20 years.
Right.
You can't depend on HB1 visas forever.
Right.
Eventually, and many of them see this, but
Right.
to what degree are you leveraging the private sector?
Right. The answer is to the maximum extent possible. That's a critical component of it, is to bring together, as planning in terms of what needs to be done, the whole California community. The one thing is, in terms of the role of the private sector and also of nonprofit groups, is that when you're dealing with a problem at this level, it's really, this is waging war. This is waging war on child poverty in California. And to wage war, you need government to drive it and to provide the basic resources that are necessary to wage war. And then you need to also bring into play all of the resources of private industry and philanthropy and community groups. So the answer is substantial, and that part will be substantial also in terms of the whole job training component, in which private enterprise, and this is the way the bill is structured, private enterprise is really the driving entity working with community colleges and academic institutions and labor in terms of driving the job training component of it. So that's really the key part for some of those.
Just a little follow-on. Google just established a partnership with historically black college,
Right.
Howard University in Washington, D.C.,
Right.
in which they bring students in computer science. I think there is concern, companies, that this HB1 visa, that at least some people believe has been misused to bring in non-immigrant, supposedly short-term employees. Usually they're high-tech, they're usually engineers.
Right.
And, you know, so then some of them are saying, wow, we better start thinking about 10, 20 years from now, we ought to start investing in. So I just think there's an argument to really energize the private sector.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's right. Yes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elizabeth Alvarez with Frank McKinley Children's Initiative Catholic Charities. And I have two questions. One of them, you mentioned the 2 million children, but I have a feeling it's much greater than that because I'm not sure what you use to measure that. But in this valley, for example, in the neighborhood that I serve, the median income is $33,000 a year. And that is, that's more than 100% of the
Right.
poverty level. So I want to kind of know about if you took into consideration like the cost of living based on the community.
Right.
That's one question. The other question is, it has to do more with, you know, in organizing, we look at and analyze things through, you know, what do you love? This question of, you know, how do you invest your time? How do you invest your energy and your money? And in this state, we haven't really invested in the things that we actually say we love. And so I really appreciate this work because, you know, we're saying we want to invest in those things that we love. And how can you not love beautiful little children, right? So I appreciate that work, but then I also see the challenges to try to pass this. So I encourage everyone to just think about it in that lens and consider like figuring out the paradigm shift that needs to happen in order to change minds, because we really do need to invest in this versus, you know, more prisons.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for both questions. In terms of the first one, the U.S. Census Bureau, we use the U.S. Census Bureau numbers and statistics, and they come out with numbers each year and a big update every other year. And, you know, that's kind of the gold standard that everyone uses. And can I, excuse me, it is, that's they apply the adapted poverty line for each state. And then you can also get some within, they do some kind of large differentiations within the state. There is an undercount, though. So one reason that California is the highest level of child poverty in the country is because of the cost of living here. So they factor in, it's actually called the supplemental poverty line, which includes the cost of living in each place. There is some undercount, and the undercount is for undocumented. The Census Bureau tries to include undocumented in the count, and they do to some extent, but as you can imagine, there's, you know, there's still an undercount there. So we don't know exactly what that is, but it's the reason that I think it's not political hyperbole to say that their number was 1,950,000, and I think it's safe to say 2 million. In terms of your second question, you know, we've done a lot of polling and focus groups on this. Some of the, you know, best pollsters in the country, Heart Research, and including we did one actually in San Jose. What's really interesting is that people are stunned by the level of child poverty in the state. And don't forget, these are registered voters, but they're not, generally involved. They're not activists. They're stunned by the level of child poverty in the state, so that's an important aspect to communicate. But they're also very concerned generally, and these are even, we're even talking about registered Democrats, and obviously what's a, pretty progressive state. People are concerned about whether we can show that these programs work, whether there's evidence that they work, even early childhood education, for example. All of these things, and that's the reason that I emphasize the Stanford research, because what we've put together are the programs that we can prove have been effective and have been cost effective. And so that's another piece that's really important. So as Catholic Charities know, we've put together a very substantial public education campaign, internet education campaign around these issues to try to build up awareness and concern about the problem. Because that's one of the reasons that we want all of you to be contacting your own social networks. Yeah.
Conway, one of the things I like about AB 1520 is actually it is not just about lifting children, it's also families.
Mm-hmm.
So the concern I have whenever we separate children from family, we are really just saying children are poor, but there is a reason why they are poor, because their parents cannot make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really having this discussion about holistic approach to child poverty is so critical. Otherwise, we will continue to think about children separate from their family. So there are so many examples. Children get health care, but then the parents don't have health care service. I think it sounds so ridiculous, because if we care about reducing generational poverty, we're talking about reducing child poverty. But at the same time, these parents also do need to be cared. So I think if there is a way to continue to language this as a both, because you have it. So the AB 1520 is lifting children and families out of poverty. And I think if there is a way we can come up with a messaging that probably will resonate with the governor and others who think, oh, this is only about children. I don't think it's only about children. I think it's about children and family. And I miss that, and I'm just encouraging all of us to think of this holistically, because my children are not separate from me,
Right.
nor are from you and all of us. So how about the children of the very low-income families whose
Right.
parents love them so dearly? What are you going to do? Feed that one child and not the parent? I think we need to think about that.
Yeah. Almaz, your point is really well taken. That's the reason for the title of the bill, Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty. And it's also the reason that there needs to be a comprehensive approach. So it's including both the early interventions and family support. There are two issues that just within this room that I think it's useful to be aware of. One is that the danger when you've got a goal of a 50% reduction is that, I mean, this is what Britain did, for example. They met their goal of a 50% reduction under the Labour government, but they did it with income supports. And so as soon as the economy changed and income supports went away, the poverty rate went back up. So we want to be sure that we're hitting it in a systemic way, and it includes the long-term investments. The second reason is frankly a political one, and that is that the public generally is supportive of help for children. They're less sympathetic to the plight of families. And so we're including families in terms of what actually gets done in this. But in terms of getting it passed, frankly, our goal is to get it passed. And so we've needed to emphasize the children. Yes, sir, in back.
My question is kind of a follow-up. Federal Hernandez Ramos here from the Department of Education in Santa Clara. You alluded to the support for children's health and getting out of poverty but not for families. The Pew Research Center recently released a survey stating that the split between Republicans and Democrats is very clear as far as the kinds of explanations that they support for poverty.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans, by 60 to 40, say that it's a personal reason. that people choose to be poor because they don't work hard enough or stuff like that, versus Democrats, about also 60-40, who say that it's structural issues, like not a high enough minimum wage, not a high enough earned income tax credit, things like that. What are your strategies for shifting the 40% or 60% to move to the direction of a policy structural approach like you're advocating to get people to understand that it's not a matter of will to be poor, but it's a matter of how circumstances are structured in society that lead people to stay in poverty, be born in poverty, and stay in poverty, no matter how much they try to get out of poverty because of these structures
Right.
put in place to keep them there.
Yep. In addition to the Pew research, as I mentioned, we've also done, as a matter of fact, we just got our, Greg, I'm not sure we sent it to you yet, but we just got poll results from Heart Research. Basically what it shows, no surprise, is that about 65% of Californian registered voters across the board strongly support moving forward in the way that we've proposed. And then some of the others are persuadable. But, we had 30% of the state. I mean, we see ourselves as progressive, et cetera, but 30% of the state did vote for Trump. So, there's a pocket of California that, we're just not going to, realistically, we're not going to get. I think, though, the argument without the slice of folks who are sympathetic but want to be sure it's cost effective, want to be sure it works, is really what we're doing is giving children and families the tools in order to lift themselves out and to just give it just equal opportunity. And that's the reason that Republicans in the Assembly, including, again, the Assembly Republican leader, now his father was a preacher, so I think he's got some social concerns. He does have social concerns, but he's still a Republican. And I think the argument there is that that's what we're doing. We're just creating equal opportunity, and then it's up to people themselves to take it from there. So if we give a child, good health care to start with, and then early child education and some academic supports, and to get the families, as Alma's has indicated, to at least subsistence level, then at least we're creating equal opportunity. And I think that's the argument that we need to reach people. We really have to emphasize the cost effectiveness of these programs too. One thing the focus groups, that folks may not want to hear this as much, but it's reality, is kind of the arguments about, you're protecting yourself against crime. Is really resonates with people. All the way in back, and then you're next.
I'm going to assume this is going to go through, and if so, then I was wondering if it's possible to provide information on resources for higher education. And that's something that we can do now. And the reason I say this is I came up yesterday, and a family with a student who spent 2 years at community college is now at the UC system, but the family cannot afford it.
Right.
And because it's a mixed family, they're reluctant to fill out the federal financial aid because they don't know where that information is going to go.
Right.
So maybe one way to help students now is to, maybe at the junior high level, provide information on, say, like Gates Foundation. I'm assuming that they still have a program where if you're the first in your family to go to college, they have scholarships, and to provide information on how to navigate the system so that they can go to college and actually, instead of maybe finding a job right away, because people who go to college are less likely to end up in poverty. So that's something we can do now, and I hope that that happens.
Right. Well, first, in terms of that you're assuming it'll pass, I mean, from your lips to God and the governor's ears, well, by the way, there's enormous statistics on what happens if a student graduates from high school. I mean, that is really key, and then you work it back, and it's, are they competitive in first grade? Are they competitive in third grade? And if your child is competitive in 3rd grade, still competitive in 3rd grade, they're highly likely to graduate from high school, which is really the key. And so all of the other issues in terms of community colleges are critical in terms of also in terms of job training and career tech. And there's been a lot of work done to help foster youth, emancipated foster youth, in terms of college costs, and we do need to expand that. That's part of the reason that there needs to be a comprehensive plan, so hopefully it would include that. Oh, volunteer next to sister, right.
I'm Linda Buckley, volunteer at large. But retired from county mental health system. Worked a lot in the 0 to 5 population. My questions are about the revenues, the current revenues, and how they might be leveraged in this for the cigarette tax.
Mm-hmm.
As there's few smokers,
Right.
that affects the early childhood rate. And I just wondered about that, and also Prop 64, the millionaire mental health tax, if this could leverage into either one of those, and if those are going down or up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm on State First 5 Commission. The cigarette tax, which, I mean, it's good, is going down. I mean, it's good that it's going down because it means that now recently there is also revenue coming in from marijuana. But the reality is it's really getting less and less all the time. And so there's actually a reduction from those sources. And for the Prop 64, the mental health money, there's been, a problem spending it in a number of counties, and also it's been siphoned off into some other things. But I keep going back to this. The comprehensive analysis is going to include what is now being spent and is available at both the state, county, local government, and school district levels. So we're going to see all of that. And that's the reason that I couldn't answer the question about how much budget pressure this creates, because we need to see that first. But the reality is those other sources are going down. And that's just the fact of it. Yes.
Hi. So I work with women at the other end who are older and have grown up in Crawford. So I know how important this is, and I think it's great. But I also, through my work, have been really involved with organizing, and I'm wondering what your plan is to reach out to the organizers in the community who can make this happen. I mean, I think in Santa Clara County, we've had a lot of success with paid workforce housing, and I volunteered and worked for that part-time and saw how the coming together of all the, organizations, political, labor, really made it happen. And so it seems like, there's so many organizing communities within, like, just this small area. How are you energizing that?
Right.
To make this happen?
Right.
I don't think we can assume that it'll happen.
Right, no, it won't. And that's the reason I was saying we really need to depend on you.
Yeah,
We need to.
I think we're organizers.
But what we need is for you to reach out to all of the organizations. So 40 around the state is the beginning. Includes labor, by the way. SEIU is deeply involved, but we need more. SEIU is enormous, but there are other unions. We need the nurses. We need everybody, and so we're aggressively reaching out, and we're asking each of the organizations and individuals who are supportive to aggressively reach out. So there are organizations doing that, there are elected officials doing that, we've got labor through SEIU doing that, but that's what, it really needs to be, ever-enlarging circles of everyone reaching out to their folks. That's how we do it. So we've got a few thousand that have signed up now, but that's the way we build up to what we need, which is 200,000 or 300,000 people signed up. Maybe last question?
I just wanted to ask you, put in a hit for changing the hashtag, because hashtag ended now is being used by like anti-Trump folks just in general. It'd be great just to do just hashtag end child poverty or something, and just to get more people connected through social media in a more effective way.
Yeah, and End Child Poverty CA. End Child Poverty CA.
It's not the hashtag that's on the website, so I'm just saying, put it.
Oh, it's the one I've got. I don't know. There may be others that are.
The name of the website, but you're also saying it's the name of the hashtag that people are using?
Oh, end it now, yeah. That was, we had a large rally with Congressman John Lewis, civil rights champion, Nancy Pelosi, Karen Bass, whole bunch of state, Holly Mitchell, state, local officials. And the end it now was the phrase that everyone used there, so that must still be used. So. Yeah, okay. No, that's good to know. Thanks. Thank you. We'll take it back from Trump.
Yeah.
Well, I'd take other things away from him too, but we'll get to that.
Conway, just one practical thing. So in terms of the process, so right now it passed one committee in the Assembly. Where does it go next? Who do we need to contact next in the process?
Thank you.
Before it gets to the governor's desk?
Yeah, thank you. So it's now in Assembly Appropriations. Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher is chair of Assembly Appropriations. She is a supporter of the bill, but it's useful to contact her and to contact her office, say how important to get it passed by Appropriations, which should be Friday of this week, and then it'll go to the Assembly floor. And so contact your members of the Assembly now. Importance to get it out of the Assembly. And then over at the Senate, where Holly Mitchell is going to quarterback it over there, who's chair of Senate Budget Committee. So the first step, though, is to get it out of the Assembly and then over to the Senate. So contact your members of the Assembly and contact Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, who's chair of Appropriations from San Diego. Thank you for that question. That's really critical. You need to please do these things. Really, literally do them today. I had one question over here, and I think.
It was the same question around timeline.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Okay.
So we have, I may have missed
Which,
the
I'm sorry.
website associated with your effort?
End Child Poverty CA. End Child Poverty CA.
Excuse me?
Okay, last question.
Helpful is if we have a sample letter, and then on the top, who to email, and then actually in the body of the letter, it says, please call these people, because it makes.
We've done that, but we'll send it out again to all of you.
Because I have the letter, but what I noticed is.
Oh, the people where
It tells you
you,
who to email and all
we'll
that.
send it to you at the latest tomorrow morning. We'll get that to you. Is that
Great.
okay?
Yeah, that'd be
And
great.
I can work with Grace and get all the details, all these processes that we may not have. If I get them very quickly from Grace, you will be able to get it today, before the end of the day.
Right. We can put it on the End Child Poverty CA too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We will have all of that to you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone at Conway. Thank you so much. I wanted to mention a couple of things. So I actually have a question for you, because there is this perception that Catholic Charities is just a social service organization. Is that how you know the organization, Catholic Charities? It's actually a social change agent in this community, and I'm very proud to work in this organization. We have Step Up Silicon Valley, which is an initiative of Catholic Charities that has been advocating for change in the community, not only just through talking and meeting, which I love, but actually through action. And I also do not know how many of you know that the first 2 Pay for Success in Silicon Valley were actually initiated by Catholic Charities. How many of you know that? Oh. So this just tells me that we do need to change this language, because we do things, we really do make things happen, not because we are smarter than others, but we really focus on what's needed in the community, and we work behind the scene. We don't put our face in the front, rather we work with people who can really help us make things happen. These 2 Pay for Successes that really came through have made a difference, one in chronic homelessness, the other one is in chronic mental health. I work for a boss who doesn't stop until he finds the Holy Grail solution for everything. So I'm giving him one little spit on that one. So we're working on data integration. We got funding from Cisco and really connecting the dots in terms of really how can community organization work together to lift people out of poverty. And the challenge always has been one individual has to go from one organization to the other to the other. At the core of this is the dignity of the individual. We forget this is not about data. Data is just a number to get us where it's a tool or something that we need to use, but it's actually about human beings. So I do want you to find a way to get connected with Step Up. And then why are we doing also this reducing generational poverty? I think it's very critical to what we want to do. If we truly care about reducing poverty and getting people access to resources, then we have to start in the families, not only in the children. Actually, I love to say in the families. And I think we have an opportunity, and I want to just claim this. We have an opportunity to work with you to move AB 1520 forward. And we will do everything we can from our office and the community that supports what we do, and you in this room, to get the word out. So we will send you the details, but get involved. Please, really do get involved. I also want to shout out to Diane Fisher for supporting us. Thank you. It really is, this is all a partnership. And then my wonderful partner, Bill, for making this possible. And we have one more left for this series. I proposed this idea to Greg and Bill last year. We said we want to create a thematic systems change dialogue, and at the end we will come up with something. We believe that we actually have already found an advocacy opportunity. I think the reducing child poverty in California is very, very important. So please help us with that. The third one is in November, the last for the series. We will try to bring advocates and systems change agents plus government leaders and hopefully a couple from the corporations to really get this word out more, not just to discuss, but also to really come up with an actionable item for us for the next year. I think you want this Conway to be done quickly, but at least we do have a long way to go before we get the whole process complete and get the funding that we need.
Yes.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you. Angela, thank you for everything. Marianne, thank you.
Please help yourselves to whatever happens.